She was demonstrating CPR compressions on a plastic dummy when the gunshot started. 30 seconds of chaos, trainees diving for cover, screaming from the parking lot. But when they looked up, she was gone. 3 minutes later, the shooting stopped, and she walked back in carrying 2 disarmed weapons and zip-tie restraints. Her hands weren't even shaking. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Community Center's monthly first aid certification class had become routine for Emma Blake. Same red plastic tables, same outdated training videos, same group of well-meaning volunteers who wanted to help but struggled with basic bandaging techniques. For 3 years, she had taught these courses with the patience of someone who genuinely cared about emergency preparedness, even when her students couldn't remember the difference between arterial and venous bleeding. Remember, for severe wounds, direct pressure is your first priority, Emma explained to the 15 participants scattered around the multipurpose room. Don't worry about being gentle. In a real emergency, you're trying to save a life, not avoid bruising. The trainees nodded dutifully, most of them taking notes on laminated cards that would probably be forgotten within a week. This particular class included typical community volunteers. Margaret Walsh, a retired teacher who wanted to help at school events. David Kim, a young father concerned about playground injuries. Lisa Thompson, an office manager whose company required first aid certification, and 12 others with similar motivations. Emma moved between the training stations with quiet efficiency, correcting hand positions, demonstrating proper technique, answering questions with the kind of detailed knowledge that suggested extensive medical background. But when asked about her qualifications, she would simply mention her certification from the American Red Cross and redirect attention back to the lesson material. Ms. Blake, Margaret Walsh asked during the wound care segment, you seem to know a lot more than what's in our training manual. Have you worked as a paramedic or nurse? Emma smiled politely while applying a practice bandage to the training dummy. I've had some additional medical training over the years. The important thing is mastering these basic skills that can make the difference between life and death in an emergency situation. She deflected personal questions with the same gentle firmness she used to redirect off-topic discussions. The trainees respected her knowledge and appreciated her teaching style, but none of them knew anything substantial about her background beyond her current role as a community education instructor. David Kim raised his hand during the shock management lesson. What if someone's been shot? Do these same principles apply to gunshot wounds? Gunshot trauma follows similar priorities, Emma replied without hesitation. Control bleeding, maintain airway, prevent shock, get professional medical help as quickly as possible. The main difference is that bullet wounds can cause internal damage that isn't immediately visible, so monitoring for signs of internal bleeding becomes critical. Her answer was delivered with the same calm professionalism as her explanation of splinting techniques, but several participants noticed the specificity of her knowledge. She spoke about gunshot wounds with the confidence of someone who had dealt with them before, not just read about them in training manuals. Lisa Thompson glanced up from her notes. Have you ever treated an actual gunshot victim? Emma paused for just a moment before responding. I've encountered various types of trauma over the years. The principles remain consistent. Assess, stabilize, evacuate to professional care. The afternoon session focused on mass casualty scenarios, with Emma explaining triage principles that seemed far more sophisticated than typical community first aid courses. She described priority systems for multiple injured patients, resource allocation, under extreme conditions, and coordination protocols that sounded more like military field medicine than civilian emergency response. In a situation with multiple casualties, Emma explained, setting up training scenarios around the room, your goal isn't to save everyone, it's to save the maximum number of people possible with available resources. That means making difficult decisions about who receives immediate attention and who has to wait. Margaret Walsh looked uncomfortable with the concept. How do you decide something like that? It seems impossible to choose who gets help first. Quote, you categorize based on survivability and resource requirements, Emma said, demonstrating on practice dummies arranged to simulate different injury patterns. Immediate category for those who will die without immediate intervention, but can be saved with available treatment. Delayed category for those who can survive with later treatment. Expectant category for those whose injuries exceed your ability to treat effectively. David Kim stared at the organized training setup. This is really advanced stuff. Where did you learn triage protocols this detailed? Emma was arranging medical supplies with systematic precision that suggested muscle memory rather than conscious planning. Advanced first aid courses cover these scenarios. The important thing is understanding the decision-making process before you're forced to use it in an actual emergency. Her teaching methodology involved realistic stress scenarios that pushed trainees beyond their comfort zones. She would create time pressure, introduce unexpected complications, and force rapid decision-making that tested their ability to apply basic skills under difficult conditions. Real emergencies don't wait for you to remember your training, Emma told the class as she set up a complex multi-victim scenario. Stress affects your thinking, adrenaline affects your fine motor control, and chaos affects your ability to communicate. We practice these scenarios so your response becomes automatic rather than dependent on conscious recall. The trainees struggled with the realistic pressure Emma created, but they also recognized that her teaching methods were preparing them for actual emergencies rather than just certification requirements. She seemed to understand how people behaved under extreme stress in ways that suggested personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge. As the afternoon session concluded, several participants lingered to ask additional questions about advanced techniques that weren't covered in standard first aid manuals. Emma answered with detailed explanations that revealed knowledge extending far beyond basic emergency response. "You really should consider teaching paramedic courses," Lisa Thompson suggested as she packed up her materials. "You obviously have the expertise for much more advanced training than community first aid." Emma was cleaning and organizing the training equipment with efficient movements that suggested military precision. "I prefer working with community volunteers. Basic skills properly applied can make just as much difference as advanced techniques." But as the trainees filed out of the community center, several of them discussed their instructor's unusual expertise. Her knowledge seemed comprehensive in ways that basic Red Cross certification couldn't explain. Her teaching methods incorporated stress factors that typical civilian courses avoided, and her comfort with trauma scenarios suggested experience that extended beyond classroom education. Emma finished securing the training materials and was preparing to leave when she heard the first gunshot from the parking lot. Not the sharp crack of a single shot, but the rapid succession of multiple firearms being discharged simultaneously. Her response was immediate and instinctive. She moved toward the windows to assess the tactical situation rather than away from the danger like a normal civilian would. Through the community center's large windows, she could see two armed figures moving between parked cars, firing at targets she couldn't immediately identify. But her assessment of their movement patterns, weapon handling, and coordination told her these weren't random criminals or gang members. Their tactical formation and systematic approach suggested training and specific objectives. Emma's mind shifted automatically from first aid instructor to threat assessment mode, analyzing angles of fire, escape routes, civilian exposure, and resource availability with the kind of rapid tactical thinking that required extensive combat experience to develop. The real emergency was about to begin, and it would reveal capabilities that 3 years of teaching community first aid had carefully concealed. The gunfire intensified as Emma moved away from the windows, but instead of seeking cover like any rational civilian, she was conducting a tactical assessment that revealed training no first aid instructor should possess. She counted muzzle flashes, identified weapon types by sound, and mapped shooter positions with the precision of someone who had performed similar evaluations under combat conditions. "Everyone get down and stay away from the windows," Emma called to her remaining trainees, but her voice carried command authority that made people obey instantly. Not the helpful suggestion of a community instructor, but the battlefield directive of someone accustomed to life-or-death decision-making. Margaret Walsh was crouched behind an overturned table, trembling as bullets shattered the community center's front windows. "Should we call 911? What's happening out there?" Emma was already moving toward the emergency supply cabinet, but not for first aid materials. Instead, she retrieved items that seemed oddly specific for a community center: tactical flashlight, emergency radio, and what looked like zip-tie restraints that weren't part of any standard first aid kit. "David, take Lisa and Margaret to the storage room in the back. Lock the door and don't come out until you hear me say 'all clear' 3 times, Emma instructed with calm precision. "If anyone else says it, assume they're hostile." David Kim stared at her in confusion. What about you? You can't go out there. Those are real guns. Emma was checking the emergency radio frequencies with practiced efficiency. I need to assess the situation and determine if there are other threats or injured civilians who need immediate assistance. That's what police are for, Lisa Thompson protested. We should wait for professional help. Emma had moved to a position where she could observe the parking lot through a crack in the damaged windows. Two shooters were advancing toward the community center's main entrance with tactical coordination that suggested military training. But their equipment and movement patterns indicated private contractors rather than law enforcement or conventional military. Police response time to this location is approximately 12 minutes, Emma said, tracking the shooter's approach. These individuals will breach the building within 90 seconds. Professional help isn't an option. Margaret Walsh looked at Emma with a growing alarm. How do you know police response times? How do you know they're going to come inside? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma didn't answer because she was focused on details that revealed the true nature of the threat. The shooters were equipped with suppressors, night vision capabilities, and communication gear that suggested a coordinated operation rather than random violence. More disturbing, they were moving directly toward the community center, with a purpose that indicated specific intelligence about the building's layout and occupants. This isn't a random attack, Emma said quietly, more to herself than to the others. They're targeting this location specifically. She realized with cold certainty that the shooters weren't here for the community center or its normal activities. They were here for her. Someone had identified her location and sent professional operatives to extract or eliminate her. The first aid classes had been perfect cover for 3 years, but that cover had finally been compromised. Emma moved toward the emergency exit with fluid precision that revealed combat training no civilian instructor should possess. Her posture, her scanning patterns, her instinctive tactical positioning, everything about her movement suggested extensive military experience. "Where are you going?" David called out as Emma approached the back door. "To end this before anyone else gets hurt," Emma replied, checking her remaining equipment. The zip ties, tactical light, and emergency supplies weren't random items. They were carefully maintained tools that someone with her background would keep accessible for exactly this situation. Emma slipped out the emergency exit and immediately disappeared into shadows that provided concealment from the advancing shooters. But instead of fleeing to safety, she was maneuvering to flank their position with tactical movement that required extensive combat experience to execute effectively. The shooters reached the community center's main entrance and began systematic clearance procedures that confirmed Emma's assessment of their professional training. But they were operating under assumptions about their target that were about to prove dangerously incorrect. Emma had spent 3 years observing this facility, learning every sightline, every concealment opportunity, every tactical advantage the building and surrounding area provided. Not as a first aid instructor planning emergency drills, but as someone whose survival instincts remained permanently active despite her civilian cover. She moved through the parking lot using parked cars as concealment, closing distance on the first shooter with predatory patience. Her approach was silent, methodical, and executed with precision that took years of specialized training to develop. The first shooter never saw her coming. Emma's takedown was swift and non-lethal, a sleeper hold applied with technical perfection that rendered him unconscious within seconds. She secured his weapon and communication gear, then used his own zip ties to ensure he would remain neutralized when he regained consciousness. The second shooter realized his partner had gone silent and began searching the parking lot with increasing desperation. But Emma was already repositioning, using tactical movement that kept her invisible while closing distance for the second takedown. Bravo 6 report status came through the captured radio. Additional voices confirmed what Emma had suspected. This was a coordinated operation with backup teams positioned around the community center. Emma keyed the radio with the first shooter's equipment. Bravo 6 in position, target not located, expanding search pattern. Her voice mimicked the unconscious operative's tone and speaking patterns, with accuracy that suggested extensive training in vocal deception. The second shooter moved toward Emma's simulated position, leaving himself exposed to her actual location. She took him down with the same silent efficiency, securing his weapons and communication gear before he could alert the support teams. Within 4 minutes, Emma had neutralized 2 professional operatives without firing a shot or causing permanent injury. Her methods were sophisticated, precise, and executed with muscle memory that revealed extensive combat experience. But as she monitored their communication frequencies, Emma realized the immediate threat was larger than two shooters. The intercepted radio traffic indicated at least 6 additional operatives positioned around the community center, with extraction vehicles and heavy weapons support. Emma returned to the building through the emergency exit, carrying the captured weapons and communication gear. Her trainees were exactly where she had left them, hidden in the storage room, and following her instructions with discipline that had probably saved their lives. "It's safe to come out," Emma called, then added the authentication she had specified. "All clear, all clear, all clear." Quote. David, Lisa, and Margaret emerged from the storage room to find Emma calmly field-stripping the captured weapons, with professional efficiency that made their first aid instructor suddenly seem like a completely different person. "What just happened out there?" Margaret whispered, staring at Emma's transformation from helpful community educator to tactical operative. "2 individuals with hostile intent have been neutralized and secured," Emma replied, checking the captured communication equipment. "Additional threats are positioned around the perimeter, but immediate danger to occupants has been eliminated." Lisa Thompson stared at the disassembled weapons. "Who are you? First aid instructors don't do whatever you just did." Emma looked at her former students, realizing that her civilian cover had been completely blown. 3 years of carefully maintained anonymity had been destroyed in 4 minutes of tactical action that revealed capabilities she had hoped never to use again. "Sometimes people have to choose between maintaining their cover and protecting innocent lives," Emma said quietly. "Today, that choice was made for me." The captured radio crackled with increasingly urgent communications as the support teams realized their advanced scouts had been compromised. Emma monitored their transmissions, understanding that the immediate crisis was far from over. Her first aid training had ended, but her real work was just beginning. Emma studied the captured communication equipment while her former students watched in stunned silence. The radio chatter revealed operational call signs, extraction coordinates, and tactical updates that painted a disturbing picture of the scope and sophistication of the attack. "Phoenix Command, this is Overwatch 7. The Bravo team has gone dark. Request immediate tactical assessment and backup authorization," came through the captured radio. Emma keyed the transmitter using the unconscious operative's voice pattern. "Overwatch 7, Bravo 6 experiencing equipment malfunction. Target location secured, conducting detailed sweep. Maintain perimeter positions." David Kim watched Emma manipulate the enemy communications with professional skill that made him question everything he thought he knew about his first aid instructor. "How do you know their protocols? How do you know how to sound like them?" "Radio discipline and vocal mimicry are basic operational skills," Emma replied absently, then caught herself. She had just revealed training that no civilian should possess, using terminology that belonged to classified military operations. Margaret Walsh was examining the weapons Emma had disassembled. "These aren't normal guns. They have all sorts of attachments and modifications." She pointed to the suppressors and tactical scopes. "This equipment costs thousands of dollars. These weren't random criminals." Emma realized her students were conducting their own investigation, asking questions that revealed more about her background with each answer she provided. "The equipment suggests professional contractors. Private military companies employ operators with government training but civilian legal status." "How do you know about private military companies?" Lisa Thompson asked pointedly. "And how do you know what their equipment costs and capabilities are?" Emma had been so focused on the immediate tactical situation that she hadn't considered how her knowledge would appear to civilian observers. Every answer she gave revealed expertise that contradicted her cover identity as a community first aid instructor. The captured radio provided additional intelligence that complicated the situation further. Phoenix Command sensors indicate additional personnel movement in adjacent buildings. Possible civilian evacuation or law enforcement response. Request guidance on collateral damage parameters. Emma felt a cold realization wash over her. The operation wasn't just targeting her. It was designed to eliminate witnesses and create plausible cover for her disappearance. The attackers were prepared to kill anyone who could identify them or their methods. "We need to evacuate immediately," Emma announced, gathering the captured equipment. This facility is no longer secure, and remaining here puts everyone at risk. David looked around the community center that had seemed perfectly safe an hour earlier. Where can we go that's safer than here? And why are these people after you specifically? Emma paused, understanding that any explanation would require revealing classified information that could put her students in even greater danger. Sometimes people from certain backgrounds attract attention from organizations that prefer those backgrounds to remain hidden. Margaret Walsh wasn't satisfied with vague explanations. What kind of background requires professional killers to keep it secret? What did you do before teaching first aid classes? Quote. The captured radio crackled with new intelligence that made Emma's tactical situation much worse. Phoenix Command local law enforcement response initiated. Multiple units en route. Recommend immediate extraction or scorched earth protocols. Emma realized the attackers were prepared to eliminate all evidence of their operation, including the community center and everyone inside it. The phrase, scorched earth protocols, suggested they had explosive devices positioned to destroy the building and create cover for their escape. Everyone move toward the emergency exit immediately, Emma ordered, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone accustomed to life or death command decisions. We have approximately 3 minutes before this building becomes extremely dangerous. Lisa Thompson grabbed her purse and followed Emma toward the back of the building. 3 minutes until what? How do you know their timeline? Emma was leading them through the building using routes that avoided windows and provided maximum concealment from external observation. Her path selection revealed detailed knowledge of tactical movement that she couldn't have acquired through first aid training. Scorched earth means they're prepared to destroy evidence rather than risk exposure, Emma explained as they moved. That includes the building and anyone who might identify their operation. They reached the emergency exit, where Emma paused to scan the exterior for threats before exposing her group to potential sniper fire. Her scanning pattern and threat assessment methodology revealed training that belonged to special operations rather than civilian emergency response. There, Margaret pointed to a black SUV positioned with clear sight lines to their exit. That vehicle wasn't there during our class. Emma studied the SUV's positioning and equipment loadout, Overwatch vehicle with communications array and long-range observation capabilities. They've been monitoring this location for extended periods. David Kim realized the implications. They've been watching the community center. Watching you teach classes, learning your routine, planning this operation. He stared at Emma with growing understanding. This isn't about random violence. This is about you specifically. Emma led them away from the building using concealment routes that kept them invisible from the Overwatch positions. But her knowledge of tactical movement and counter-surveillance techniques revealed expertise that raised more questions about her background. Who are you really? Lisa asked as they reached temporary safety behind an adjacent building. First aid instructors don't know counter-surveillance tactics or military terminology. Emma checked the captured radio for updated intelligence about the attacker's operational status. The communications revealed that her deception was beginning to unravel as the unconscious operative's prolonged silence raised suspicions among their support teams. Phoenix Command Bravo team remains unresponsive. Recommend immediate tactical assessment and possible compromise protocols, came through the radio. Emma understood that her vocal mimicry had bought them temporary time, but the attackers would soon realize their advanced team had been neutralized. When that happened, they would escalate to more aggressive tactics that could endanger innocent people throughout the area. Margaret Walsh was studying Emma's behavior patterns. You're not surprised by any of this. The equipment, the tactics, the terminology, you understand everything they're doing because you've done it yourself. Emma realized her students had moved beyond confusion to active investigation of her background. Their questions were becoming more pointed, their observations more accurate, and their conclusions more dangerous to her operational security. Sometimes people retire from careers that require them to maintain low profiles, Emma said carefully. The skills remain useful for protecting others, but the details need to stay private for everyone's safety. David Kim pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Professional killers attacking a community center is definitely something law enforcement needs to handle. No phone calls, Emma said immediately. Radio communications indicate they're monitoring local emergency frequencies. Any police response will be anticipated and possibly compromised. Lisa Thompson stared at Emma with a dawning realization. You're not just retired from some classified job. You're actively hiding from people who want to kill you. That's why you've been teaching first aid in a small community center, instead of working somewhere that matches your actual qualifications. Emma monitored the captured radio as the attacker's communications revealed increasing urgency and escalating threat levels. Her cover identity had provided 3 years of peaceful anonymity, but that peace was ending as organizations with long memories and unlimited resources had finally located her. The investigation her students were conducting was revealing truths that could get them killed, but the tactical situation was evolving too rapidly for her to provide explanations without compromising everyone's safety. Emma made the decision that would determine whether they survived the next hour. She was going to have to trust her first aid students with information that could destroy lives, including their own. "I need to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about your first aid instructor," Emma said quietly. "But once you know the truth, there's no going back to normal lives for any of us." Emma looked at her 3 students crouched behind the adjacent building, understanding that the next few minutes would determine whether they lived or died. The captured radio continued transmitting intelligence that revealed the true scope of the operation hunting her. "My real name is Captain Emma Blake, formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment, specialized in direct action operations and high-value target extraction," Emma said quietly. "I've been hiding here for 3 years after walking away from a classified program that I couldn't morally continue." Margaret Walsh stared at Emma with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Army Rangers? But you're teaching first aid classes in a community center. Why would someone with that background?" "Because the program I was involved in required eliminating people who knew too much about government operations," Emma interrupted, "including American citizens who posed no actual threat to national security." David Kim processed this information while monitoring the black SUV that remained positioned to observe their former location. "So these people are hunting you. They're not foreign terrorists or criminals. They're American operatives trying to eliminate someone who refused to kill innocent people." Emma checked the captured radio as the communications revealed that her deception was unraveling. The attackers had discovered their unconscious teammates and were escalating to lethal force authorization against anyone in the area. "The program was called Operation Silent Shield," Emma continued. "Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it eliminated journalists, whistleblowers, and political dissidents who threatened to expose classified government activities." Lisa Thompson felt sick as the implications became clear. Government assassins. You were trained to be a government assassin, and now they want to kill you because you refused to murder innocent people. "I completed 3 assignments before I understood what Silent Shield actually involved," Emma said, monitoring the enemy radio traffic for tactical updates. "The targets weren't foreign terrorists or enemy agents. They were Americans whose only crime was learning information their own government wanted to keep secret." Margaret Walsh was trying to reconcile the helpful first aid instructor she had known with someone trained in government assassination operations. What made you stop? What made you walk away from that life? Emma's expression hardened as she recalled memories she had tried to suppress for 3 years. The 4th assignment was Dr. Patricia Hawkins, a CDC epidemiologist who had discovered that a classified bioweapons program was testing experimental viruses on American soldiers without their knowledge or consent. The captured radio crackled with new intelligence that made their situation much worse. "Phoenix Command. Target has been positively identified as Captain Emma Blake, Operation Silent Shield. Escalating to Priority Alpha protocols. All witnesses designated for termination." David Kim heard his own death sentence transmitted through military radio equipment. "They're going to kill us because we know who you are." Dr. Hawkins had 2 young children and a husband who taught elementary school, Emma continued, her voice steady despite the growing threat. She wasn't a terrorist or foreign agent. She was a scientist who discovered her own government was using American soldiers as test subjects for illegal biological weapons. Emma led them to a new position that provided better concealment while she explained the moral crisis that had ended her military career. "I was ordered to eliminate Dr. Hawkins and make it appear like a random crime. Instead, I warned her and helped her disappear with evidence that eventually shut down the bioweapons program." Lisa Thompson understood the larger picture. "So you saved American soldiers from being poisoned by their own government, but that made you a traitor to the people who ordered those experiments." Quote, "Silent Shield doesn't forgive betrayal," Emma confirmed. "They've been hunting me for 3 years, using every resource available to government intelligence agencies. Teaching first aid classes in a small community center was perfect because it kept me invisible while allowing me to help people. The radio traffic revealed that additional teams were converging on their location with authorization to use any means necessary to eliminate Emma and her witnesses. The operation had escalated from targeted assassination to mass casualty event. Margaret Walsh realized they were trapped in a situation that exceeded anything civilian law enforcement could handle. If these are government operatives with unlimited resources, how do we survive something like this? Emma was analyzing the enemy communications to determine their tactical options. Silent Shield operates outside normal legal constraints, but they're still bound by operational security requirements. They can't conduct major military operations on American soil without risking exposure that would destroy the program. Which means what, exactly? David Kim asked, watching Emma monitor multiple radio frequencies with professional efficiency. It means they need to eliminate us quickly and quietly, then disappear before anyone asks questions about why a community center was attacked by heavily armed operatives, Emma explained. They can't afford extended operations or massive collateral damage that would attract federal investigation. Emma's tactical analysis revealed their enemy's vulnerability. The same secrecy that made Silent Shield dangerous also limited their operational freedom. They couldn't risk exposure through excessive violence or extended engagements. Lisa Thompson was beginning to understand Emma's strategy. You're not just trying to escape. You're trying to force them into situations where they have to choose between completing their mission and protecting their operational security. Exactly, Emma confirmed. If we can survive long enough and create enough complications, they'll be forced to withdraw rather than risk exposing the entire Silent Shield program. The captured radio transmitted new intelligence that confirmed Emma's assessment. Phoenix Command, local law enforcement response increasing, media presence possible. Recommend immediate extraction unless target elimination can be completed within 10 minutes. Emma smiled grimly at this communication. They're running out of time. Every minute we stay alive increases their risk of exposure. Margaret Walsh watched Emma coordinate their survival with the same calm professionalism she had used to teach CPR techniques. How do we stay alive for 10 more minutes against professional killers with military equipment? Emma checked her remaining captured equipment and assessed their tactical position. The same way I've stayed alive for 3 years, by being smarter, more prepared, and more committed to survival than the people hunting me. David Kim realized Emma had been preparing for this confrontation throughout her 3 years of civilian life. The first aid classes, the emergency protocols, the detailed knowledge of this facility, you've been planning for this day. I've been preparing to protect innocent people when Silent Shield finally found me, Emma corrected. Because I knew they would eventually track me down, and I knew they wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who could identify them. Emma monitored the radio traffic as the enemy teams received new orders that confirmed their operational timeline was collapsing. They are being ordered to complete termination within 5 minutes or abort the mission entirely. Lisa Thompson understood the stakes. 5 minutes to live or die. And our survival depends on a first aid instructor who used to be a government assassin. Emma checked her watch and prepared for the final confrontation. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Time to show Silent Shield why they should have left me alone. Emma watched the captured radio display count down their remaining time as Silent Shield operatives moved into final assault positions. But instead of fear, her expression showed the calm determination of someone who had spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. 4 minutes, Emma announced to her students, but they're not going to get what they came for. David Kim looked around their defensive position, seeing only limited cover and overwhelming enemy advantages. How can you be so confident? They have superior numbers, better equipment, and professional training. Because they made the same mistake everyone makes when they underestimate people who choose principle over power, Emma replied, checking a device she had pulled from her emergency kit. They assumed I've been hiding for 3 years. I've been preparing. Margaret Walsh watched Emma activate what looked like a complex communication system. Preparing for what? To expose Operation Silent Shield permanently, Emma said, uploading data from the captured enemy equipment to her device. Every radio frequency they've used, every tactical call sign, every operational protocol, all being transmitted to journalists, congressional oversight committees, and international human rights organizations. Lisa Thompson stared at the data transmission progress bar. You're not just trying to survive this attack. You're trying to destroy the entire program. Emma had spent 3 years documenting Silent Shield operations, building evidence that would make their continued existence impossible. Her community center job had been perfect cover for intelligence gathering that prepared her to expose government assassination programs when the inevitable confrontation arrived. Dr. Patricia Hawkins wasn't their only victim, Emma explained as data continued uploading. Silent Shield has eliminated 47 American citizens over the past 8 years. Journalists, scientists, politicians, activists, anyone who threatened to expose classified government activities. The captured radio revealed increasing desperation among the assault teams as their operational timeline collapsed. Phoenix Command, we have unknown transmission activity from the target location, possible data breach in progress. David Kim realized the tactical situation had reversed completely. They're not hunting you anymore, you're hunting them. I've been collecting evidence of their operations for 3 years, Emma confirmed. Bank records, communication intercepts, victim documentation, operational protocols. Everything needed to prove Silent Shield exists and prosecute everyone involved. Emma's preparation had been comprehensive and methodical. While maintaining her cover as a first aid instructor, she had built the most detailed documentation of illegal government operations ever compiled by a single source. Margaret Walsh understood why Emma had chosen such an unlikely hiding place. The community center provided perfect operational security. No one would suspect a first aid instructor of conducting intelligence operations against her former employers. More than that, Emma said, monitoring the data transmission progress. Teaching emergency medical skills allowed me to help people while gathering evidence to protect them from government assassination programs. Every person I trained in first aid was someone who might survive if Silent Shield ever targeted them. The deeper meaning of Emma's 3-year mission became clear to her students. She hadn't been hiding from her past. She had been building a future where programs like Silent Shield couldn't exist. Lisa Thompson watched the enemy radio traffic show increasing panic among the assault teams. They know what you're doing, they know you're exposing everything. Which is why they'll be forced to withdraw rather than risk confirming the existence of a program that's supposed to be completely classified, Emma explained. Killing us now would only provide more evidence for the investigation that's already beginning. Emma had anticipated every aspect of this confrontation, understanding that Silent Shield's greatest strength, absolute secrecy, was also their critical vulnerability. Once exposed, they couldn't survive public scrutiny. The captured radio transmitted new orders that confirmed Emma's strategic assessment. Phoenix Command, abort termination mission immediately. Full extraction authorized. Disavow all operational contact. David Kim listened to their enemies, retreating in real time. They're running away, just like that? Because continuing the attack would prove everything I've just transmitted to oversight authorities, Emma said, watching tactical teams withdraw from their positions. Silent Shield can't afford to be connected to a mass casualty event that would trigger a federal investigation. Emma's victory wasn't just about surviving the immediate threat. It was about ending the program that had created that threat. Her evidence would make Silent Shield's continued operation impossible, protecting future victims from government assassination. Margaret Walsh realized the scope of what Emma had accomplished. You've been fighting this battle for 3 years, using every day to build the case that would destroy them permanently. Because the only way to be truly safe from programs like Silent Shield is to expose them so completely that they can never operate again, Emma explained. Hiding only delays the inevitable confrontation. Documentation and exposure provide permanent protection. Emma had chosen the most difficult path, not just escaping her dangerous past, but actively working to ensure others wouldn't face the same threats. Her first aid classes had been both genuine community service and perfect cover for intelligence operations that served a larger humanitarian purpose. Lisa Thompson watched the data transmission complete successfully. How many people will be saved because you chose to fight instead of just hiding? Every future victim of government assassination programs, Emma replied. Every journalist who investigates classified operations, every scientist who discovers inconvenient truths, every citizen who threatens to expose government wrongdoing. The captured radio confirmed that Silent Shield teams had completed their withdrawal, abandoning the operation rather than risk further exposure. Emma's strategic patience and comprehensive preparation had achieved victory without firing a shot. David Kim understood the lesson Emma had taught through her actions rather than words. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who choose conscience over comfort, principle over personal safety. Emma had demonstrated that individual courage, properly applied with intelligence and preparation, could defeat institutional power when that power was used for illegitimate purposes. Her 3 years of apparent weakness had actually been strategic strength building toward this moment. Margaret Walsh looked at Emma with new understanding. You gave up a prestigious military career, risked your life for 3 years, and sacrificed normal relationships, all to protect people you've never met from threats they don't even know exist. Because that's what service actually means, Emma said simply. Not following orders without question, but protecting innocent people from those who would abuse power. Emma had redefined patriotism and service through her actions, showing that true loyalty meant protecting citizens from their own government when that government violated its founding principles. The community center first aid instructor had accomplished what conventional military operations couldn't achieve. She had defeated a classified government program through moral courage, strategic intelligence, and absolute commitment to protecting innocent lives. Her victory represented proof that individual conscience, when backed by competence and determination, could challenge institutional corruption and win. 3 weeks after the Silent Shield exposure, congressional hearings dominated national news as Emma's evidence triggered the largest government accountability investigation in decades. But Emma herself remained invisible to media attention, having disappeared once again into civilian life before journalists could identify the whistleblower who had provided the classified documentation. David Kim returned to the rebuilt community center for the first aid class since the attack. The new instructor was competent and friendly, but lacked the extraordinary depth of knowledge that had made Emma's teaching so effective. During the wound care segment, he found himself sharing insights Emma had taught him about pressure point control and shock management. "Where did you learn these advanced techniques?" the new instructor asked, impressed by David's understanding of trauma care that exceeded basic first aid certification. Someone who understood that emergency skills might be needed in situations more serious than playground accidents, David replied, thinking about Emma's realistic training scenarios that had seemed excessive at the time but now appeared prescient. Margaret Walsh had become a volunteer coordinator for emergency preparedness training throughout the county. Her experience with Emma had taught her that competent instruction could make the difference between panic and effective response during actual crises. She insisted that all training programs include stress scenarios and decision-making under pressure. "Why do you emphasize psychological preparation so heavily?" Other coordinators asked about her unusually comprehensive approach to emergency training. "Because real emergencies don't wait for you to remember your training," Margaret would reply, unconsciously echoing Emma's teaching philosophy. "People need to practice making life-saving decisions when they're scared, confused, and operating with incomplete information." Lisa Thompson had returned to her office management position, but with transformed understanding of observation and situational awareness. She noticed details about building security, personnel behavior, and operational patterns that had been invisible before her experience with Emma. When her company updated their emergency protocols, Lisa contributed suggestions about communication security, threat assessment, and evacuation procedures that impressed corporate security consultants with their sophistication and practical applicability. "Have you worked in security or law enforcement?" the consultants asked about her advanced knowledge of emergency management. "I learned from someone who understood that ordinary people might face extraordinary situations," Lisa explained, implementing training programs that prepared employees for scenarios beyond fire drills and medical emergencies. The congressional investigation into Operation Silent Shield revealed systematic violations of constitutional rights that resulted in criminal charges against 43 current and former government officials, but the hearings never identified Emma as the source of the evidence, referring only to, quote, classified documentation provided by an anonymous whistleblower. FBI Director Patricia Chambers testified that the investigation had uncovered, quote, the most comprehensive intelligence operation ever conducted by a single individual against their former employer. But when pressed for details about the whistleblower's identity, she cited national security concerns and ongoing protection requirements. Emma's evidence had been so thoroughly documented and legally obtained that prosecutions proceeded without requiring her testimony. She had anticipated this possibility and structured her intelligence gathering to be self-sufficient, protecting her anonymity while ensuring justice for Silent Shield victims. Dr. Patricia Hawkins emerged from 3 years of protective hiding to testify about the bioweapons program that Emma had helped her expose. Her emotional testimony about government scientists using American soldiers as unwilling test subjects sparked additional investigations that led to comprehensive reforms in military medical ethics. "I'm alive today because someone chose conscience over career," Dr. Hawkins told the committee. "Someone risked everything to warn me that my own government had ordered my assassination for trying to protect American soldiers from illegal medical experiments." The community center where Emma had taught first aid classes became an unexpected pilgrimage site for people inspired by the story of someone who had fought government corruption while maintaining anonymous service to her community. A simple memorial plaque appeared on the wall where Emma had demonstrated CPR techniques, in honor of those who serve others without seeking recognition. The plaque contained no names, no specific references to classified operations, just acknowledgement that some people chose to help others despite personal risk and without expectation of reward or recognition. New first aid training programs began incorporating lessons about recognizing expertise in unexpected places and the importance of learning from anyone willing to share knowledge, regardless of their official credentials or apparent background. Emergency medical instructors across the country reported that their students were asking more sophisticated questions about trauma care, mass casualty scenarios, and psychological first aid, topics that had been considered too advanced for civilian training before Emma's teaching methods demonstrated their practical importance. Military medical training programs quietly adopted several techniques that had appeared in Emma's documented evidence, particularly her methods for teaching stress-resistant decision-making and maintaining effectiveness under extreme psychological pressure. The techniques were incorporated without attribution, listed simply as field-tested methodologies for emergency medical instruction in high-stress environments. Emma's innovations improved military medical training while her identity remained protected. 5 years later, emergency response statistics showed measurable improvement in civilian trauma care outcomes, particularly in situations involving multiple casualties or complex injury patterns. The improvements were attributed to enhanced training standards, but knowledgeable professionals understood that many techniques traced back to a single anonymous instructor who had taught first aid at a community center. Emma's influence on emergency medical education was comprehensive but completely invisible to academic research or public recognition. Her methods had been absorbed into standard practice without anyone knowing their origin or the classified background that had developed them. Congressional oversight of classified programs was permanently strengthened by legislation requiring independent whistleblower protection and mandatory reporting of operations that targeted American citizens. The reforms were known informally as the Silent Shield Prevention Act, though Emma's role in inspiring them was never officially acknowledged. Veterans' medical protection laws were expanded to prevent unauthorized medical experimentation after Dr. Hawkins' testimony revealed the scope of illegal testing programs. American soldiers gained new rights and protections because Emma had chosen to warn a scientist rather than kill her. 10 years after the Silent Shield exposure, a new generation of government employees received training in ethical decision-making and whistleblower responsibilities. The training emphasized that true patriotism sometimes required challenging illegal orders and protecting citizens from government overreach. Emma's legacy lived in the lives protected by oversight reforms, the soldiers saved from medical exploitation, the citizens defended from assassination programs, and the countless people trained in emergency skills by instructors who had learned from her anonymous example. Her greatest achievement was proving that individual conscience, when supported by competence and sustained by moral courage, could challenge institutional corruption and create lasting change that protected future generations from the abuses she had witnessed and opposed. The first aid instructor who had moved differently when bullets started flying had transformed not just emergency response training but the fundamental relationship between citizens and their government, ensuring that service meant protection rather than elimination of the innocent. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.